Hello and welcome to the Sunday League podcast, brought to you as part of our UK NFL Fantasy Football Network. I'm your host, Samit Paul, and I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, co-creator, co-commish, and co-El Jefe himself, Jack Cowling. Jack, how are you, brother?
Yes, mate. Good. Yeah, really good. Good to get going. Obviously, exciting time. Something that started as a bit of a pie in the sky idea. We're now full steam ahead, aren't we?
We certainly are. So before we get stuck into the fantasy chat, we thought it would be a good idea to kick things off with an introduction to us, the Sunday League, and what we hope to achieve with this network that we've created. Now, as mentioned, I'm Samit, I'm an NFL fan, and I'm now a long-suffering New York Giants fan for well over a decade. And with that fandom over the years has come a love-hate relationship with NFL fantasy football. The Sunday League is hopefully a new home for NFL fans based in the UK, not just to play the game, but to be part of a community as well. So whether you're a fantasy veteran, you're fresh off your first draft, if you want strategy, banter, and even a few laughs along the way, this is hopefully the place for you. Now, we are full across our 5 leagues for the upcoming NFL season, which are divided up based on region. But as we continue to grow and expand the league and the community, if you're interested in playing and being part of our network, please contact us at sundayleaguenfl@gmail.com and we'll get back to you with further details. Now, Jack, you had an important decision to make this off-season. Do you want to fill us in on that in terms of where your NFL allegiance now lies? And, of course, your thoughts and hopes for the Sunday League?
Yeah, it was big decision time. So I joined the NFL bandwagon through fantasy, really, through yourself, wasn't it? Sort of introducing me to it and soon got the bug and got addicted to it. You know, I remember NFL from Channel 4 in the 90s and stuff and keep an eye on it. And obviously when the Patriots and other teams were doing well, it was one of those things I had an eye on, but never really got into it until, sort of fantasy fandom kicked off about 5 years or so ago. But I've never had that allegiance to a team. I think because I was so excited for all my players to do well, I never kind of really got involved with a particular team, as it were. And had a few flirts, the Bills for a little bit. I was like, before they sort of really climbed towards the top. Sort of like with them, 49ers were obviously really fun when I was first kind of getting into it. But I thought this year, especially with us kickstarting all of this, it's time to sort of try and commit. And for no other reason, really. One thing that made me sort of make the decision, I was quite keen for it to be more of an East Coast team, just because obviously game times and when it's on the TV and all the rest of it was good. But yeah, when I was trying to think of a valid reason, one of my original all-star fantasy picks was A-Chain, who obviously for the Dolphins that did really well. One of my favorite movies of all time, with Pet Detective, with the Dolphins were in that. And I just sort of have leaned towards diving into Fin Nation. So I've now joined all those forums, getting involved and talking to some really cool people. There's actually a lot that they're doing on that side of things in the UK. And I think Miami and the Dolphins organization are trying to do more. So yeah, let's give it a go. Obviously not the best time to get involved with them because it's a full rebuild sort of situation. But yeah, we'll see how we get on. But I think I'll still be the Cornell Crushers, my fantasy team. I think they'll still be my first love. But certainly keeping a closer eye on the Dolphins. And then from my side, what I want from the league, it's been great to see, I've only ever played in Friends League, and it's been really cool to see just how much interest there is in sort of fantasy across the UK, which has been cool. Obviously, sort of filling our leagues to capacity in its inaugural year has been great. So thanks to everyone that's joined and shared those. But the community side of it is going to be what I'm really intrigued by. It's great to sort of see all the people that are being really active on the WhatsApp group and in the league chats and sort of really getting that going. It's a bit weird for me getting NFL news from other people that aren't just you, because it's usually you sort of sending me tweets at 2 a.m. or whatever at a time you're sort of up and sharing breaking news and things like that. So it's been good to see that. But yeah, I just want to get involved with that. Certainly got a key goal for the end of the first year to know everyone by their names instead of team names like Crew Camel Toes and Seahawk Tour, and to actually get to know people individually. But I just love to see that the community aspect really grow. Be wicked if we can get to a point in the future where we're sort of doing in-person drafts and meetups for the UK games, etc. But yeah, hopefully, meet loads of good people and win their money along the way.
That all sounds good to me. Can't promise you I'll be there at 2 a.m. when the Dolphins are struggling during the season, but if you're planning a trip to Miami at some point, I will be there. All right, good stuff. So with the intros done, we thought a sensible starting point would be to briefly look back on last season first before we have a deeper dive into our fantasy strategies and mock draft for 2026, and have a quick reflection on who were the top performers, who were the underperformers last season, and what we expect from them this year. Now, we're obviously doing Dynasty Leagues this year with the redraft phase next season for those who make it through, and so there is, of course, a need for a long-term strategy. I have to admit, I really have thought about going full on Antonio Conte on the Midlands League, bringing in my winners as soon as possible, trying to enjoy some success before I inevitably see the end of a cycle after a couple of years and walk away a champion. But I am in it for the long haul, as I hope we all are. And so if we break this down, Jack, by position perhaps, if we start with the running backs, are there any names that stood out for you from the list that you feel are still big hitters or potential big hitters for this season? Or perhaps conversely, ones to avoid off the back of a positive season?
Yeah, definitely a few people, weren't there? I think Jonathan Taylor, again, I remember him doing really well for me a few years ago, but the Colts, I think because of Daniel Jones, I don't know, I just wasn't high on them. I know a lot of people weren't, and they kind of did obviously fizzle out towards the end here, but Jonathan Taylor was a beast, wasn't it? I think he was the second highest in half PPR, which is what our leagues are for the season. So he was definitely a standout. And I think it was people like that, really, sort of Travis, I think it goes by H.A., not Etienne, now for the Jags, before obviously he's moved this summer, but he was a sneaky beast. And again, he was always one of those where he always looked like he could be a top 10 sort of running back and such, but he'd usually have a good load out, some highs, and then there'd be plenty of sort of lows in there as well. So I think those two were probably the standouts away from, your regulars, your Christian McCaffreys, Robinsons, Gibbs, and sort of, the people who are sort of pretty nailed on for top 10. Chase Brown, another one. I know that you've liked him. You've picked him up a couple of times, and he seems to be growing and so into more and more reliable. So yeah, I think those guys were probably the standouts, really. You've got a few other people maybe a little bit lower down in the rankings in terms of sort of Kenneth Gainwell, obviously had a big year for Pittsburgh and sort of, obviously he's now got his move to Tampa, which will be really interesting how they sort of divvy up that back room. But it was good, but they were probably standouts. And then, I think we finally saw the fall of Alvin Kamara, which was pretty heartbreaking. Again, he's won me plenty of matchups and stuff in the past and stuff, but it looks as though his time has come. And then the rookies, it was obviously a really widely discussed as being sort of an all-time rookie class for the running back. So it was interesting to see how they got on. Ashton Genty, a terrible Raiders team. He did okay. I think people were expecting, maybe top 10 in his first year and such, and it obviously never quite reached those. But I think he did okay. I think he showed enough to be pretty high on him. I picked up a Marion Hampton, who I was really hot on just with Chargers, and thought he'd do great there. And again, he did all right, but he just missed quite a lot of games. So it's always tricky, when you're sort of judging people on half a season. So I think it was largely, I think there's quite a stable core now of sort of proven running backs. There's obviously the real elite that are still at a good age, certainly when we're talking dynasty and stuff. And then you still got some of the old boys that can still do it. But I'm intrigued this year to see who's potentially going to move from that middle of the pack and maybe jump into the sort of top 10, top 15 sort of territory.
Yeah, so if we look at the scoring rankings from last season based on half PPR, CMC topped the list. Now, he will turn 30 this summer, and although he has had big seasons with the Niners, he's also had injury troubles along the way as well. I think he will have another big season this year, especially with Mike Evans coming on board, new targets for Brock Purdy, which subsequently opens things up in the run game and the short passing game where CMC can thrive. But as a long-term investment, with the age and the injury history in mind, he's not the play as a priority pick. Especially when you've got a pair of 24-year-olds in Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, who are both primed for big seasons this year and multiple seasons beyond that. Jonathan Taylor is still only 27, and I do feel those three and many more are just a little bit more robust, and they'll give you that sort of reliability as well. He was second in last season's rankings. I think Devon A-Chain is one that I'll watch. He's last man standing in Miami after a sort of Royal Rumble of chaos there over the off-season where everyone seems to have left. You've got Ashton Genty, you've got the rookie Jeremiah Love coming through with the young guns in the mix as well. So plenty of elite talent there to look for early and many more intriguing names thereafter. The one name that hasn't come up that we haven't discussed, Jack, is James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. I've never really been that high on him, and I don't know whether that's something that you share, but it's just he hasn't ever really been one of the running backs that I've looked on the board and sort of prioritized and thought, yeah, I really hope he's still there when my pick comes around. What do you make of him?
Yeah, I like he's really good. He's obviously really good. There's something there that feels a little bit untrustworthy. I don't know what it is. I think because the Bills have always got 2 or 3 other running backs that, again, he takes up the lion's share of the plays and such, but they've always got a few lads who sort of come in and either sort of get the touchdowns or sort of take on certain big plays or third downs and things like that. So I think he's, again, I had him on a team last year and he did really well. You know, he sort of had some big scores and was consistency. But I just think compared to a lot of the others that I would kind of class as elite, I do think he's prime for sort of, off weeks and low scores, especially when you've got Josh Allen who can run it in himself, you know, especially in that sort of red zone territory. You kind of don't look at Cook as the same way as maybe as you do some others because, you know, Allen probably is your number one sort of runner, as it were. So, he's firmly in that top 10, in and around the sort of top 5. I think he was sort of 6th overall last year. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about it. But again, the Bills, it's tough because the Bills now, you know, they've been under Sean McDermott for so long. Are they going to look different? Are they going to act different? Are they going to play different? So I don't know. I just feel as though it's such a Josh Allen team. I kind of don't trust any of the other people around him for whatever reason. So yeah, good player, but not someone that I'm sort of super high on.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it on the head there with the Josh Allen factor and influence that he has. It's just kind of screaming and giving me nightmares of when I had Alvin Kamara in a previous year. They'd be at the goal line, then all of a sudden you just see Taysom Hill trot out and take it off him. So it's almost that side of it that I feel probably apprehensive about selecting James Cook. So fair point. So that's the running backs covered. If we now move on to the wide receiver class, starting with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was an absolute joke for a large part of last season in terms of just being able to get open, stack up yards, and was just an absolute star and an elite wide receiver for the Seahawks. Puka Nacua had himself a year, was also just so effective at getting open, racking up receptions and yards as a big-time target for Matt Stafford. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, annoyingly, George Pickens had a big year with the Cowboys. I think they're all primed to follow it up with another good season and many more beyond that. Looking further down the list, personal one for me as I went really early with Tetairoa McMillan last season as a rookie. If I remember correctly, he did kill me late in the season when I got eliminated in the playoffs, but I just think he's an absolute star for the future. As is Emeka Egbuka, again, another one that tailed off last season, but no more Mike Evans in Tampa Bay. You'd expect him to step up. Wan'Dale Robinson will probably be feeling himself after securing a big deal with the Titans. There's intrigue over Jalen Waddle, who's now moved over to the Denver Broncos. And another personal one for me was Ricky Pearsall. I thought he was a massive disappointment last season. I picked him and Lad McConkey quite early, both of whom weren't particularly great. I think Lad bounces back and has a big year this year, but much like the rest of the 49ers roster, I think health is obviously going to be a big thing for Pearsall, who just was not reliable enough last season. And that's just going to determine whether or not he can be the guy for Brock Purdy long term. Who stands out for you, Jack, on this list, both from a positive and negative standpoint? Who are you envisaging having a big year and perhaps ones to avoid and be wary of?
Yeah, you've highlighted a load of good names there and such. Obviously, the two at the top, Puka and Jackson, are really interesting for different reasons. You know, I think Puka highlighted in public that he's here for a good time, not a long time, but I just really hope we don't see him disappear, with his extracurricular activities and such. But Jackson, Yeah, he's really interesting. I think he's got to be one of the most loved players in the league. It's hard not to. He's awesome, especially because he's doing so much of it on his own. But I'm just intrigued. Will teams, for a second year, being able to plan for that, will that be detrimental to his output and sort of, or how the Seahawks are going to kind of try and, rebuild, reshape so that it's all new and fresh and he can carry on doing what he's doing and such. But in terms of names, kind of similar to what you said, obviously, over at the Broncos, Jalen Waddle leaving us to go there is really interesting. But also for the Cortland Sutton, because Sutton's always been for me one of those that, you have him as an WR2 or if you're lucky in a shallow league, getting him for sort of your wide receiver free. He's always just so reliable. He's solid. But again, how's that going to potentially look? CD Lamb, again, George Pickens was the sort of highlight master last year. CD up until last year was one of the top dogs. So interesting to see what might happen to him. Drake London, it just shows flashes where I'm just like, that dude is a beast. I'm just like, again, one of my favorite players to watch when he's on it and he's actually getting thrown the ball by someone capable. But again, is their quarterback room going to be able to deliver him anything like that? So those guys, and then one of my OGs, Justin Jefferson, again, for this, no spoilers alert, but up until this year, he's always been my number one pick whenever I've picked in the top 5 on any NFL fantasy, because again, just love him and the rest of it. But obviously last year was a bit weird, but new quarterback, is he back on form? Is he back to where he can be? And injuries and things like that go his way. So those are probably the ones. A few outsiders that, again, Alec Pierce seems to be a darling for a lot of the media. Again, people just seem to really love him and really rate him. I don't watch enough of the Colts to say that I truly get it. Obviously, he's got sort of the deep ball threat and things. He's solid as a fantasy player, but I don't know. I don't know if he can step up into, say, top 15, top 10. Parker Washington was really good, but and on the flip side, Brian Thomas Jr. really struggled. There was rumors that they might be up for trading him and stuff, but he was obviously great as a rookie. He again, I think I was seeing him go round 1, certainly early round 2 in picks last year and such. So that'll be interesting. And just sort of where people through trades and stuff, where they land out. Roma Dunze at Bears, will he get more ball now that DJ Moore's gone to the Bills? How will that work out? So loads of interesting stuff at play. I think compared to the running back, I reckon this will be a lot more volatile. This will move a lot more. I think sort of the top 15 could be quite different next season to what it is this season. Whilst maybe in the running backs, I'd maybe expect 3 or 4 people to move. I could easily see 8, 9, potentially 10 people moving in and out of the top 15, sort of say, in the wide receivers, which is pretty exciting.
The Jefferson one is an interesting one for me because I had big reservations over him last season, purely down to the JJ McCarthy factor. I think it's safe to sort of disclose now that last season in our league, I was picking one ahead of you, and I do know how much you like Justin Jefferson, so I decided to go elsewhere and let you have him. But like I say, there was also a massive element of just having that reservation over McCarthy and wondering what the knock-on effect and impact that would be for Jefferson moving forward. Kyler Murray is obviously in the building now, so from a Vikings perspective, you hope to see development from 9, and Kyler Murray comes in and does the job that they want from him. But I look at the Jamar Chase situation with the Bengals differently. So Joe Burrow goes down with an injury. Yes, very bad news. Joe Burrow is just that good. But with Joe Flacco there, Joe Flacco's going to fling that ball downfield for fun. And I see that as being a case of Jamar Chase is down there somewhere. Let's just chuck it up and see what happens. And I think Chase still racks up big numbers next season and beyond. But the Jefferson one's just interesting to me, that I just have those reservations still with the uncertainty, short-term and long-term, over the quarterback situations of the Vikings. Do you share that, or do you just see Justin Jefferson going really high and sort of having no hesitation over him being worthy of being a top pick?
No, I think he's definitely slipped from sort of top 5 pick. I think he'll be at the tail end of the first round, potentially on the turn for the second round now. I think because I think Kevin O'Connell's got a lot of, Grayson, he's always been kind of spoken about as a bit of a quarterback whisperer, but last year was the first time it it sort of really did fail, didn't it? And I think there's quite a bit of pressure on him. But I think Kyler Murray, if he's fit and available, I think he'll be able to get on the line with Jefferson. Again, I would expect him to get back into the sort of top 15 in terms of point scoring. Just he's different class. I think him, Chase, Jackson and Puka, I don't know, they're all in my top 5. If you would say who the top 5 wide receivers in the sort of league, certainly off the top of my head, those 4 would definitely be in the top 5 as well. So I still think the talent and everything like that's all there. It's just situation, isn't it, for him? But no, I know what you mean. I think Chase is as close to a lock as you can get in terms of, like you said, with Burrow, it's money, and without, they've always seemed to have a quarterback that can still get him the ball. But I think because, again, you've got T. Higgins in the room that's taken away, coverage and sort of it just opens up for him a lot more. Whilst, Jefferson, for a lot of the time, the number 2s and 3s have been solid, but not maybe to the same extent. So, yeah, it will be interesting. Big year for the Vikings for sure.
Yep, it certainly will be. Moving on to quarterbacks then. If we look at last season's rankings, we've got the likes of Josh Allen, Drake May, Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, and Justin Herbert high up in the rankings. Obviously, Jackson Dart is in that top tier, arguably the pick of the bunch and the best quarterback in the league for my New York Giants. You've got a safe pair of hands in the short term with a Matt Stafford or a Jared Goff, but I think particularly with the former, perhaps age is a massive concern. There's all sorts of talk about his back leading into last season, which ultimately didn't seem to trouble him too much. There's intrigue over Patrick Mahomes coming back from his own injury setback and how long it will take him to get back to his very best. That sort of impacts the short term, but I don't imagine there'll be any long-term ramifications of that. Any other names in early contention, or conversely, how early are you moving for one of those top-tier quarterbacks? And are there any names that you are possibly looking to avoid early on?
Yeah, again, I think no more than a handful, I would sort of say, quarterbacks that I'd be really tempted to take early. Your Allens, again, you've got to hope that they're fit and stuff, but Lamar Jackson is going to be back. Obviously, he had a down year last year, but in a fantasy aspect, him, Jaden Daniels for Washington, if he's back to what I think those 3 in particular are sort of, I'd go early for them, and really early on them, round 1 sort of pick. The rest of them, you want a good quarterback, you want an elite quarterback sort of tied up, but there's so many now that I think is kind of interchangeable, and it's a lot to do with situation stuff where it's not as big a, I guess, pressing need for me personally. Again, I wouldn't say push to get a Trevor Lawrence or a Bo Nix necessarily. If I thought, Justin Herbert, potentially even Sam Darnold, Jackson Dart, as you sort of say, these sort of players are going to be there for the next round or a couple rounds later. So I think you go for the elite early, definitely. And Drake May, I should add into that sort of elite list. He's definitely up there with Josh Allen, let's say Lamar Jackson. And I think Jaden Daniels, if he's fit, he showed that rookie year that he's just an absolute monster as well. So I think those are the guys that you really go for. And then everybody else, it's sort of pick your poison. Again, I tend to try and tag team with a wide receiver. I quite like doing that. So quite often who I pick first, if it's not a quarterback, might dictate who I go for in the second, third, fourth round or whatnot for quarterback and stuff. So I think there's the standouts, and then there's a big batch of players that you can be pretty content with, and probably what comes into more, because we're doing super flex, is who you might look to then pick up as your sort of second quarterback. And obviously we've not got a great rookie class for quarterbacks coming in the draft this year, so there's not going to be lots of options there. So you're probably looking for players who found themselves in new situations that might have a little peak, that can supplement the team then that way.
So moving swiftly on to tight ends next, we've got Trey McBride, who had a great season last year. Lots of people are high on Tyler Warren, and rightly so. There seems to be a bit of a theme from me from last season in our redraft league, where I went early to go get Brock Bowers. That ultimately didn't feel as though it was worth going so quickly to get him, but factor in this is dynasty moving forward for us, and the introduction of Fernando Mendoza to the equation. I think that could be huge for Brock Bowers this season and beyond. I find the likes of Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Mark Andrews and Sam Laporta all intriguing, but not in that top tier conversation. Pitts obviously showed more last year, but Kittle, Andrews in particular, are getting on in age. Gadsden for the Chargers was one name that really sprung out and I picked up on the waiver wire at some point last season. But I think particularly it's Colston Loveland for the Chicago Bears is the one to watch. Travis Kelce was an interesting one for me as well because I was of the opinion that he should have retired last year. But he ranked a lot higher than I actually thought he did last season. So again, who stands out for you from this list? And is it Colston Loveland? I think you picked Colston Loveland last season. Is he the one that sort of is a standout prospect for the Dynasty League moving forward?
Yeah, tricky. With Loveland, yeah. I think him and Tyler Warren, though, again, it was a really tough choice. I remember when I was picking between those and they're both still on the board. And I went for Loveland. I think, again, probably a bit situational. I quite like the idea of him at the Bears and with Caleb Williams and sort of seeing what Cole Kmet has sort of done there in spurts. I thought Loveland might be able to come in. He's a bit like Brock Bowers in sort of, I don't think he's not as good in the receiving game, but he's an all court player. He can yards after the catch, the separation and things like that. I just love watching him as a player. Brock Bowers, I think you'll probably need to, because obviously you've done a lot of redraft rather than dynasty. I think Bowers is going to be amongst, consideration for the first round again, just because we've seen what his output is basically wide receiver one at tight end, isn't it? When he's on it and when it's happening, obviously last year. Are you dead sure that Mendoza's going to be starting, or they've obviously brought in Kirk Cousins, haven't they? And I've heard some chat that might actually be with an idea of easing Mendoza into it. And I think having seen Kirk at the Falcons, I'm like, oh, that could be quite rough. Certainly sort of season one at least. But I think long term, yeah, Bowers he's certainly got the high appeal there. But yeah, Tyler Warren, I loved watching. He's a beast, really good player. Obviously tailed off a little bit as the Colts did. Again, as they sort of lost a bit of their offense identity. I think at the start of the season, they were on like a historic rate, weren't they? They were sort of, kind of full slinging it, and he was certainly getting his fair share. But he was good. Harold Fannin Jr. is an interesting one because he's looked really good. And in a room that had Njoku, who's now been, I believe, is a free agent, isn't he? So he's been let go. So it looks like they're putting sort of all their cards in on him. So that'll be an interesting one. But tight end just changed. I remember when I got into fantasy, it was kind of Kelce and Andrews, and that was it, really. You'd kind of get Hunter Henry sort of weeks and sort of Dalton Schultz and a few of these now players that are slightly older. Whilst the last few years, it just feels like tight ends have become a new specimen of player and output. Because, there's even like AJ Barner, he scored well last year. He did well. There's loads of interesting people. And then you've got, what's the Pittsburgh? Darnell Washington, is it? The absolute monster. You've got all sorts of different, body types and output and things. But yeah, you're obviously just looking for those that are going to be in the reception game, like the guys at top, Trey McBride and people like that. Trey McBride's one of my go-tos. He's just, again, so reliable now. I think he's as safe as pick as out there. Pitts finally had his year, after a good rookie year. I think people have been wanting to pick Pitts for year on year, and he's just been so middling and such. But last year, fair play to him, he finally kind of delivered a really strong season, sort of throughout the season for a pretty poor offense as well. So tight end, it's sort of, again, there's the cream of the crop that you hope you might land one, and then outside of that, it's kind of pick your poison, just pick a player you like. I've quite often ended up with Jake Ferguson at Cowboys, who doesn't seem to get anywhere near the love as a lot of the others, but he's always done quite well for me. He's always one of those. Again, I trust Dak. When throwing the ball, and they got their wide receiver room is so dangerous that it opens up for him. And he's just always felt really reliable for me whenever I've had him as well. So yeah, another name to look out for there.
So I don't profess to be an NFL draft expert in any shape or form, but the one name that I have heard good things about is Kenyon Sadiq. So I don't know if he's one name that sort of popped up on your radar and is one to consider in dynasty leagues moving forward.
No, yeah, 100%. I think similar to sort of the Tyler Warren and Constant Loveland coming out last year. From just what I've heard, again, similar. I don't watch any college ball and things like that. I think it's probably quite important we tell everyone we aren't experts, we aren't professionals. This is all just sort of opinion. Don't take anything we say as gospel. We will be as wrong as often as we are right and things like that. But yeah, no, I have heard from all the sort of podcasts that I listen to and sort of YouTube videos on sort of ahead of the draft coming up. He definitely seems quite an exciting prospect.
So just to round off this feature, we are going to look at the top individual defensive players. Now, your boy Jordan Brooks was leading the way last season. Myles Garrett was a standout name in second place. As a New York Giants fan, I'm hoping to see Brian Burns move up a few places this year with new defensive coach Denard Wilson promising a violent Giants defense, which sounds like a lot of fun. And then I guess I would like to get your thoughts on Max Crosby in particular after the whole situation of his failed move to the Ravens, who subsequently moved for Trey Hendrickson, and he'll be looking to make a big jump at this stage of his career under Jesse Minter. Who stands out on this list for you from last season, but also are there any names that you're looking out for to make a big splash this season?
Yeah, defensive players, individual defensive players, really interesting. It was the first time I'd played in the league last year doing it. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I think what I go for on the defensive end is the players that I like watching the most. Like, as silly as it is on that side, they do still score really valuable fantasy points. So obviously there needs to be a bit of consideration. But I just go for the players that I love that cause carnage and sort of, that are sort of, always involved. You turn on, red zone and they're there making big stops and such. So, yeah, as you say, Jordan Brooks, again, he's sort of my go-to and would continue to be this year. Will Anderson Jr., again, just one of my favorite players to watch. Obviously, Myles Garrett, rightfully so, is probably top of the tree at the moment for defensive players. But in terms of game in, game out, Will Anderson for me it's just so fun to watch. Obviously, you've got a few of the other boys there that you sort of listed at the top. Max Crosby, like you mentioned, really interesting how that all played out, wasn't it? And sort of, I'm presuming he's just straight back in, leader of the Raiders and such. So you'd expect he's probably going to go nuclear to try and show the league that, that they all flopped in terms of not, trading for him and stuff. And then, I don't know, what's Micah Parsons? Is he going to, I don't know what his injury timeline is when he potentially could be back and stuff. I don't know if you know that at all. But it'll be interesting. I think Brian Burns is an interesting one because, I'm just intrigued what you do. Because if you go for one of these Arvell Reese or Sonny Styles, who are obviously getting loads of hype at the moment as linebackers coming out of the draft, you obviously took, was it Abdul Carter, wasn't it, last year you got?
Yeah.
You've suddenly got a hell of a lot of defensive weapons, haven't you? So it'll be interesting sort of who kind of has the output there from all of those players and stuff. So, for me, probably more so than any position, I think defensive, I just go for players I like watching the most. And as I sort of say, you've kind of got your main names there, but Will Anderson Jr. is the sort of player that I just love watching.
So up next in this very first episode of the Sunday League podcast is our fantasy strategies and mock draft. Now, going through my list of draft strategies over the years, I feel like I've tried it all. Full transparency, not with a great deal of success. So for those listening, feel free to go make a cup of tea or coffee now while I'm talking, and then lock back in when you hear Jack's voice again. But as I say, I've gone heavy on running backs or wide receivers early. I've done hybrid. I've gone early on a tight end or a quarterback in the third round. And then last season, I just said, screw it. I'm picking players I like and or I'm rooting for. And that was actually quite a fun way to follow both real life football and the fantasy element of it. Now, obviously, we're in a more competitive situation environment this year moving forward with the introduction of the Sunday League and our network. But in your years doing this, Jack, do you feel as though there is a winning formula or a strategy of some sort that can legitimately put you in the mix for winning? Or is the level of luck involved in terms of who you land, who's still available on the board when your pick comes around? It just makes it so unpredictable and hard to strategize? Or do you think there is a way and an approach that can help you be successful?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal is to pick either side of you, because You will always go for some wild selections and generally leave players on the board that shouldn't be on the board. No, I wouldn't profess to have. Again, I do follow some podcasts and YouTubes of fantasy, and they quite often talk about taking running backs really late and focusing on wide receivers or this and the other. To be honest with you, I'll tend to do a sort of a big board of my own players of sort of who I like, which will be done through historical performance, team quality, and then how much I like them really, and that side of things. So, and I think ultimately, especially with Dynasty, you're going to have this team for a long time. So I think you've got to have players that you actually want to cheer on and such. Again, it's always been quite easy for me because I've not had an official team and stuff. So kind of choosing teams for direct opponents or rivals and things like that hasn't really come into play and stuff like that. But I can imagine for a lot of people, it does. So yeah, I think you want to choose, try and choose players that you just find fun, that are enjoyable, but obviously have that high scoring potential and such. But no, I think obviously with we're on Sleeper and all sort of platforms that they tend to have their sort of orders of players and rankings and things like that. So you've always got a bit of an idea, but I think it's for me, probably the one thing that I do quite consistently is I try and get a few players for each position as soon as possible. I'm not someone who would draft 3 or 4 wide receivers. I think that would I'd be bricking it, that I'm going to end up with some absolute tat at running back or tight end or whatever it is. I tend to try and be quite varied with what I select, as long as, obviously the right sort of players are there. But again, like you were mentioning, I'm still relatively new. I think we've been doing it, 5-6 years or so now. It kind of made me laugh when we did our introductions in the leagues and stuff. It sort of, there was a run of us that was sort of like, yeah, I've done it for 5 years. Some guys were like, it's my first year. Some were a few years. And then shout out to Matt who came in. I think he's been playing for like 15 years or something like that. And he was a bit like, oh, there's a bit of pressure on me, is there? So, and whilst Matt's in mind as well, I should shout out that he runs a big charity event, which is the JTT Cup, which is really important for the Joshua Talent Trust. He runs a big best ball competition and such, which if you're on any of the Facebook fancy pages or in any of our groups or anything like that, hopefully you've seen a link to that. So that's a really good cause to get involved in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo those sentiments, and I'm sure we can share a link in the description of this podcast wherever it's published, and do our bit to share the word on that for a great cause. Just to go back to touch on the comment that you made, it kind of sounds as though I essentially went a year early on just going for players that I like in a redraft scenario rather than a dynasty one. So I'm hoping I get some similar luck this year around, that I'm able to land some of the names that I'm looking to get for the long term, that I can really get behind them back.
But the thing is, the team you selected last year, certainly in one of our leagues, the redraft, when you were going like Lab McCon, you were going young, you were just like, I'm just going. That'd be a much better strategy in Dynasty than it would redraft. Because do you know what I mean? Like, you'd hope then coming into year 2, year 3, you've got this, unbelievable, Alex Ferguson, 96, all the kids coming through all together sort of territory. It's just, you did it in a redraft when it just was blowing my mind, because I was like, that guy's currently wide receiver 3 and things like that. So I admired it, and I admired the commitment to it. I think you maybe only had one player over 25 or something like that in a redraft, wasn't it? So it was like a bit different. And but yeah, it might serve you better in Dynasty.
All I'll say is that I had a great time doing it, and I don't regret a minute of it. But you're absolutely right. It would have been much better postponing that strategy for 1 year and doing it this year as opposed to last year. But we live and learn, and we're on to the new season. Right, so on we roll with our mock draft discussion next, and we're not going to do a traditional mock draft as there's a million out there for people to look at, so who wants to listen to us two schmucks make our own? What we're going to do is we're going to run through Roto Trade's list, and we're going to discuss the order that they've got the players in and share some of our thoughts on the individuals for the season ahead. So Jack, if we look at the top 5 to begin with and break that down, we've got Bijan Robinson with the first pick, followed by Jahmyr Gibbs, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Puka Nacua, and then Jamar Chase with the 5th pick. So they've obviously gone with the 2 running backs, the star running backs that we discussed earlier, followed by 3 wide receivers. Do you agree with that order, or would you chop and change anything now? I think there's arguments in favour of both strategies if you want to go running back or wide receiver. They're all elite players in their respective positions. We've spoken about Robinson and Gibbs in detail earlier on and just how valuable long-term assets they are in a dynasty league, but the same could very well be said of Njigba and Chase and Nakua as well. But what do you make of that order, and was there anything that you would change out of that?
I think they're all valid, aren't they? They're all top of the tree for a reason. I think if someone's selecting them, you certainly can't argue it too hard. Robinson, again, his output is there and such, but there is just something with him. I think it's just the Falcons thing. I just don't know. Yeah, how much I trust the Falcons organization. I know there's been a lot of change and everything like that, so it'll come good. But yeah, again, I don't know if I would pick him number one. Gibbs would probably be more tempting for me. Be interesting who they get in. I don't know if they already have, but in terms of a Montgomery replacement, I don't know what they're thinking there. That obviously worked. But no, I think it makes sense, especially on half PPR like our season. Our competition's going to be. I think they certainly make sense there. Hard to argue. I think probably outside of the top five, I think Josh Allen's probably dropped a bit low there on this mock draft. I think him not in the top five is probably a bit surprising. But again, they're all elite, so it's quite difficult to argue too much.
Just specifically on Nakua though, where are you picking in your league?
I am third, I want to say.
Okay, well, I'm not going to ask you who you're looking to pick because it'll give the game away. Okay. But just on Nakua then, is the off-field incidents and the checking in to rehab enough to influence your decision-making early on in terms of if Nakua is still on the board and you're on the clock? Or do you look at the contribution, influence on the field and how good he is as a player, as an individual, but also in this specific Rams system? Is it enough to make you ignore what's happening off the field this summer, or is that a massive consideration when you're looking at a long-term dynasty asset?
No, I'm not touching him. I'm not with that higher capital. I think NFL compared to UK sports and stuff, you rarely get where these athletes just go bonkers, and it just seems to happen. And I just feel as though it's one of those things. But once it's happened, once the sort of cat's out the bag, as it were, I don't know, does it go back in? And as I said, I love him so much as a player. And he's, again, one of those that I've always had in my teams whenever I could. I got him off the waiver wire early in his rookie year, and he basically won me that league. And he's such a beast, but it's not right. It just doesn't feel right. And given the talent that's going to be in and around the same sort of, where you're selecting, at that sort of, certainly round one and such, I don't know. Do you want to get left with a guy that's in rehab for the next 2-3 years and you sort of, you never really see it. So it feels as though the one thing I guess you could argue is, from all reports and all sort of words coming out of LA, is it's sort of the big year for the Rams, isn't it? There's chat, like you said, Stafford might be hanging it up at the end of the season. I don't know if Devontae Adams will still be there, but he's there. Sean McVay even might not be hanging around and stuff. So it sounds as though, obviously, they've traded up to get the Chiefs guy. So it sounds like, it's ring or bust for them this year. So there is an element of that where you can trust McVay to maybe get him back on board and sort of fully fire him. But no, so again, spoiler alert for everyone in my league, I will not be selecting Nakua with a firm overall pick. No.
Fair enough. So a player you mentioned earlier, and Josh Allen, comes in at 6. He's followed by Drake London, Malik Neighbours, Justin Jefferson, and Lamar Jackson in 10th. I've actually got a number of question marks over this group, and it starts with Drake London. Now, I'm not questioning his ability. I think he's a top-class wide receiver, but 7 seems very high for him. And for me in particular, the quarterback situation at the Atlanta Falcons is a big factor in why I question that. Malik Neighbours is coming back from a very serious injury. Now, you hope that he makes a full recovery and comes back the player that he was before, and hopefully even better as he gets more experience and develops his game further. But short term, that's a problem. We don't quite know the schedule of his return just yet. But hopefully that's not something that has a massive impact on him long term and takes something away from his game. Justin Jefferson, I've already mentioned, and raise my question marks in terms of the quarterback situation with the Vikings as well. And judging from what you said earlier about Lamar Jackson, 10th seems a little bit too low for him.
Yeah, I would say so. Like you said, again, this is just as we've just done a mock draft through Roto Trade, Superflex, half PPR dynasty. And London, that's high for him. I'd be shocked if he went even first round, probably, to be honest with you. So that definitely seems. Neighbours is a really interesting one. Obviously, your boy, yeah, unbelievable player, isn't he, and stuff. But that's a long old injury. Dynasty, you don't have to worry about that so much. You're obviously selecting for long term. I think the Brian Thomas fall off and such would maybe give me a few nerves around Neighbours, because again, sort of only having best part of 1 year as evidence of a player's capability to be selecting with your first round pick is maybe a little bit risky. Justin Jefferson, obviously, I think you're pretty happy with him if you're getting him towards the end of the first round. But yeah, I'd probably I would go Lamar Jackson over most of those players. I think just as a reliable MVP level player that can do it all. He can throw it, he can run it in, he can, he's going to score high as long as he's fit. Obviously, it's going to be New Look Ravens. They need to get him some weapons. Again, that's been mind-boggling that they haven't sort of really pushed the boat out on that side of things for a few years now. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I think London and maybe Neighbours, both 7-8. I don't know, just maybe a little bit rich for me. But Neighbours, I can see it a little bit more. But I think I would probably still lean towards, even your sort of Ashton Genties or sort of the younger up and coming either running backs or sort of wide receivers there potentially.
Yeah, my guy Zay Flowers has been someone who I seem to land on quite consistently in the later rounds to give me some depth and just sort of a reliable, nothing too flash, nothing too bad, but just a reliable source of points on a weekly basis. And I think he'll obviously be a favoured weapon for Lamar Jackson again this season, but just go out and get Lamar a serious weapon, because you've got to add something to that offense as well, and give him the opportunity to sort of take that to the next level.
Yeah, I think for how much they were offering for Max Crosby, I know they went and got 100, but obviously AJ Brown's still potentially on the block. It's just always surprising to me, that maybe they're not in a conversation with someone like you. Again, you give them a true one, and then you got Zay Flowers as your two. You're like, I don't know. We always talk about it, don't we, in terms of sort of Ravens just letting you down every time you kind of think, right, they're a real contender. And I just think if they could really go out and get that one, it would make a hell of a difference.
Couldn't agree more. Moving on to the next five, we've got Devon Achane, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Ashton Genty. Now, Achane, I believe, will have a big season. Now, you could look at it from the opposite angle and say that teams are going to scheme to shut him down because the Dolphins are sort of lacking so much talent now on the offensive side of the ball. But I think if he doesn't do it, then who does? I do expect him to have a pretty decent season. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a safe pair of hands. I think he continues to get you good receptions, targets, yardage, touchdowns, and is just a really solid and wise dynasty investment for the next few years. Then comes the influx of the cornerstone quarterbacks. You've mentioned May and Daniels and how great they are. And if you land one of them, you're in a good place. And Ashton Genty, I think things have to get better for both him and the Raiders. I think he was disappointing last season, but he wasn't helped by the situation that he found himself in at that franchise. But you'd hope with the sort of improvements, upgrades in the quarterback room and just the team as a whole, you'd think that he would take a step up and improve this season. What are your thoughts on that group? And would you make any changes to that?
Yeah, I think that they're probably all in the right sort of area. Ajane's really interesting. As you sort of say, he's going to have to carry this offense. There's no doubt about that. But I don't know, is that a hindrance? Because again, you tend to see these running backs do really well when, there's wide receiver threats, there's tight end threats, there's an RB2 that's a true threat and things like that. And when it's all on one person, again, especially someone that relies on speed so much, he could get beaten up if he's having to do that cowbell sort of level of running. Is he going to make it through the season or, and that side? So he's really interesting. I love him. Again, he's definitely someone that I think is worthy of going at this sort of level. But that's what I will be considering for him. The others, yeah, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, I think that's perfect. Them two sort of being next to each other, I definitely think that's the right sort of level for them. And then Genty, listen, I think there was enough there. I think there was enough there that you can feel pretty good going for him fairly early on. Raiders should only improve. You know, they've obviously spent quite a bit of money. They've got the high draft pick. They seem to be trying to kind of, move in the right direction. Good new coach. So I'd like to think Genty would be a pretty safe bet. So I think they're all in the right region for sure.
On to the next 5 then, and we've got Joe Burrow in 16th, followed by Jonathan Taylor, Jalen Hurts, James Cook, and Jeremiah Love. Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. The only question mark for me with him is if he is able to stay healthy for an entire season. If he can, he's going to score you big fantasy points, and the league is a better league when Joe Burrow is playing week in and week out. Jonathan Taylor, we've spoken about. Jalen Hurts, I don't know whether there's the sort of Giants bias on my side that I don't think that he should be that high. James Cook, we've spoken about. And the one that I would sort of pick out from this particular group that for further discussion is Jeremiah Love. A lot of talk about him, suggesting that he could go early in the draft, and the New York Giants are one of the teams being linked with picking him early on. What are your thoughts on him and sort of the upside of going with a rookie that is tipped for a big future and a bright future against sort of the risk factor of the unknown and not really knowing what his ceiling is?
Yeah, it happens, doesn't it? I think people, they just love a young running back who's most likely going to be a clear number one wherever he ends up. Do you think he goes like? I don't know if I see him go past Titans again. There seems to be a pretty obvious potential there, but again, you just don't know who's going to address it. It's one of those. I think the guys put in the WhatsApp group, like, how realistically, how far could he fall? And it's sort of, it's an interesting one. If he doesn't go top, if he doesn't maybe go Titans, Giants, Commanders, after that, it kind of looks quite far off that he might go. But people love to go, big on running back. He doesn't seem to be getting the same sort of hype as Ashton Genty from what I'm hearing. People seem to say he's a pretty faultless player, really high ceiling, high floor. Kind of, someone you can trust straight away. But he doesn't seem to have that Robinson and Genty sort of where they are like, this is a once in a generation type player potential and all the rest of it. So I think it makes sense. Coming in that sort of, he could go first round, but probably mid-second, late second, that sort of territory seems about right to me. And it's quite exciting, isn't it? Taking a punt on the unknown and sort of just, again, going early, having that to brag over everybody throughout the rest of the season. And, you kind of pinning your mast to pinning your flag to that mast by being the one ballsy enough to sort of select him and all the rest of it. So, again, probably for you, thinking more dynasty compared to redraft, because again, he'd obviously be coming ahead of loads of Barclays and Henrys and all these people who, again, if you were to go the Conte route, like you said, that you're probably a little bit more right. I know what I'm going to get. It might seem a bit more of a gamble, but in dynasty in particular, people love to go for it. So he could go anywhere in those first 2 rounds, so it'll be interesting.
21st to 25th sees Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, CeeDee Lamb, Bucky Irving, and Jackson Dart into the conversation. Breece Hall, very vocal earlier in the offseason about getting a move away from the New York Jets. Didn't get it, and to be honest, he's not really one of those names that sort of sticks out on the list of running backs for me to go at this stage. I don't think he's ever really kicked on and shown that ability to be a top priority pick. Jackson Dart, hopefully a fixture of the New York Giants for many more years to come, and in turn a valuable long-term dynasty asset. Dual threat quarterback, will get you points with his legs and with his arm, and I think he'll be a very wise pickup if you're looking for a quarterback at this stage. CeeDee Lamb is the one that sticks out in this particular group purely because you mentioned him earlier, but George Pickens obviously had a very, very good season last year. He had a good link up with Dak Prescott, but you see CeeDee Lamb having a big bounce back year, and not only being a valuable player for the Cowboys, but being a massive threat for fantasy teams as well.
Yeah, I'd be really happy if I got Lamb. I think that sort of late round or sort of, that sort of pick, I think that'd be a really good selection there. Barkley, I mean, he's really good, isn't he? But just, again, tricky one. I guess a little bit like your Christian McCaffreys and stuff. Is he in that stage where you're maybe thinking, okay, this is sort of more of a legacy player to maybe get me over the line rather than someone that I'm sort of backing for the next 3 to 5 years and such. Yeah, Brees Hall, that seems way too high for me. I don't love him. I don't think he's ever been reliable consistently. He's obviously got flash plays and potential, but don't love him. And the Jets, do we ever trust them? I was quite surprised they didn't go for a coaching change and stuff there, but he, that wouldn't tempt me in it anyway. Bucky Irving's an interesting one because, like we were saying earlier, they've picked up Gainwell, isn't it, from Pittsburgh? That they got him in the off season. So yeah, it'll be really interesting because again, Bucky Irving was one of those that you thought, right, this guy is going to be, an RB1 and sort of a real sort of top player and such. And then, it hasn't maybe quite happened to the level that we sort of expected. I don't think so. Again, I don't know. I think you're kind of getting into the stage now where you're starting to look at ages, you're starting to look at situations a little bit, and you're kind of, again, picking the players that maybe you like more than others, because they've all, I think we're out of sort of the faultless sort of rounds, sort of the players that you feel really like confident with. And I think you're starting to get to players where they start to have question marks. And I think each of those certainly have that.
So just to wrap up what would be the end of the third round across our leagues, you've got Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes, George Pickens, Garrett Wilson, Brock Bowers, Tetairoa McMillan and Bo Nix coming in from 26 to 32. Influx of quarterbacks at this stage, and you've got George Pickens and Brock Bowers, who we've discussed. So I guess the one person that I wanted to pick out from this group, Jack, was Tetairoa McMillan for further discussion. As I mentioned earlier, I just really, really rate this kid so highly. I think he's got the frame, the physicality, the speed and the hands to become an elite level wide receiver. I think dynasty-wise, you're going to see him get better and better year on year and more effective, and he's going to continue to put up big points. There is an ongoing question mark over Bryce Young. Even though he had a good season last year, there was a down season prior to that. I don't think that's enough to sort of have any reservations over McMillan. And as I say, I just think he's a really top prospect and a top player.
He's your boy, isn't he? He's the one that I know that you're going to be praying that you can kind of select with your second pick or third pick, whatever it may be. It's fine. We're running Titan Premium, so definitely the likes of Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, these boys would be way higher for me. Just again, like all these Brees Halls and people like would talk about that. Bowers, McBride, they would be way ahead of those sort of players. So those guys would definitely move up. McMillan, love him. Yeah, really good player. I think you can feel quite confident. I think Young, again, we quite often expect quarterbacks to be, Burrows and be these elite players off the bat and such. And again, he's obviously had the really bad season, and then he's had slightly up and slightly down and stuff. But I think there's enough there. And again, I think they connected well enough last year to show that. Yeah, I think you can feel fairly safe with that one. Pickens seems a bit low, but again, contract year, he was playing out his skin. He's got off-field issues and character issues potentially, and that's what's sort of discussed and stuff. So, again, there's sort of question marks there. But from those ones, Bowers, McMillan, McBride, I would be happy. I mean, I'd be over the moon if I got any of them with third round pick. No, that's for certain. But I think those are probably the three that, just looking at this particular mock draft, I would have higher up for sure.
Anyone else a bit further down the list, Jack, that you feel is worthy of a mention? I see Kyron Williams there sitting in 36th. I know he's one player that you've picked previously. Blake Corum seemed to take a few points off him last season in particular. Is that a player that you look to avoid moving forward? Is there any other names that sort of stand out from that list from 33 onwards?
Yeah, I think I've had Kyron every year he's been in the league in a fantasy team. He's been really good as a performer, but last year it did seem as though they just started to move away from just using him exclusively, and set Blake Corum stuff coming in. So I think he's probably in around the right sort of level because he's a really good player, but age-wise, it's not like he's really young and such. But in around there, Kenneth Walker, obviously at the Chiefs, will be really interesting. Again, a player on fantasy, sometimes you can be over the moon with him, and he can score big. But he's had lots of injuries. He's had down periods as well. But I mean, in terms of the situation he's going to find himself, that's pretty elite, isn't it? I think Chiefs are obviously going to be chomping at the bit for a big season. So that'd be really interesting. You got your little run of sort of quarterbacks, again, when you're talking sort of Justin Herbert, Sam Darnold, Brock Purdy, Prescott, you kind of get into the stage where are you going to go and nab one of those? That would be interesting. And then you get to a quite fun stage of the draft where you start considering, your Marvin Harrison Juniors, your Lam McConkeys, these boys start coming up, and you start thinking, are you going to be the one that, potentially goes for them? And are they going to turn into players that they either showed in their rookie or they were tipped to be coming out of college and stuff? So it's interesting, but I think this stage, as I sort of say, it's kind of getting to the period of where you need to look what you draft in the first few rounds, where the holes are, what you maybe haven't selected yet, and start maybe picking a little bit more positionally. Whilst I think top 2-3 rounds, you might be selecting on talent.
There is one more name on this list that's just stood out to me, and I want to get your opinion on him, and that's Chris Olave. He's 43rd in this mock draft. Now, he has had his well-documented issues with concussion over the past few seasons. Is he someone that you're willing to pick around this time in the draft if he's still on the board, or do those concussions concerns worry you enough to steer clear and try and look somewhere else for, say, like a Marvin Harrison or an AJ Brown?
I really like him. I think at this sort of level, you could. I think the Saints are an interesting team, aren't they? Again, the quarterback has been a little bit unsure in terms of in recent years, but they seem to have maybe found second Chuck. I don't know if they're going to try, kind of go for another quarterback in the draft or anything. Not that there's much depth there, but it seems to be sitting there. But he's just one of those players. Whenever I've had him, similar to you, I've kind of always had him in sort of the flex or sort of the flex position. I've never had him as a wide receiver 1 or 2. I've either picked him up when he's coming back from an injury or maybe traded for him when the value's low. And then he just, again, red zone, and you're like, that's Olave. It's just like, it's either him, having a barnstormer or him going off for concussion, as you sort of say. So I think at that round, again, I think given his importance to the team, he's still at a relatively good age. And I think I'd be, again, weighing up the pros and cons, I'd be quite tempted if he was still on the board.
So I guess the last port of call in our mock draft discussion is the individual defensive player side of things. And looking at the rankings, we've got Will Anderson Jr. in first, Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Burns, Micah Parsons, and Max Crosby completing the top 5, with Myles Garrett sitting in 6th. No Trey Hendrickson, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, regardless of his age. I thought he would be one of the players towards the top end of this, but he doesn't appear to be even in the top 20 or so players. Thoughts on that, and who would you say are the sort of standout names in this area?
Yeah, I think Hendrickson, he's sneaky old, isn't he? So I think for Dynasty, again, and he is really good. He's undoubtedly really good. And again, he'll have a point to prove, I think, at the new team and stuff. But his age might be a reason there. Will Anderson's definitely sort of my pick. No, in honesty, it's just not something I would feel too qualified to sort of comment on too much. As I sort of say, I've always just gone for who I like the most, or players I like watching the most. And that'll probably be my tactic again this year. So, I think there's obviously all the star names. And I think, again, probably more so than the other positions, because it's only one of them that you're drafting. It's a little bit more fluid and active in terms of waiver wires or sort of people you can pick up. So again, the receiver room and things like that, the rosters or sort of the player pools get obviously, fully selected, and there's limited talent going to be available. Whilst I tend to find on the defensive players, you can still, if you pick someone up and they get injured or you're not happy with them, you can go and find somebody else a little bit easier. So not as stressful drafting for that person. It'll be interesting when people start picking them though, because again, on sort of, I said last year was the first year I played with it, and they went pretty late, and I think probably because of that reason. So maybe not quite as late as sort of kickers sort of territory, I think, but sort of towards the latter rounds rather than kind of worrying about them until you're sort of, your first 6, 7, 8 rounds or so, I think. But people like Matt and the other more established and experienced players, I'll probably take their lead and sort of see when they start selecting and start kind of getting involved there.
Yeah, I'll certainly be keeping an eye on the leagues in our network that are drafting in early May, taking notes, and it'll be very interesting to see how those play out. So I think that's a wrap on the very first episode of the Sunday League podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it and you'll stick with us through the course of the season for plenty more NFL fantasy football chat. We'll have draft day content coming in the next week or so, our positional ranking discussions, we'll have rookie talk and reaction to all the latest NFL news. Our first league draft, as I mentioned, is slated for the first weekend of May, and from that point on, we'll have deep dives into how those went and analysis and guest reactions. In the meantime, please do give this episode a like or leave a positive review if you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe and come on this journey with us as we hope to see the Sunday League go from strength to strength, whether you're a participating member of one of our leagues or if you're just listening to the podcast and enjoying our discussions on fantasy football. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And you can follow us across all social media at Sunday League NFL. Jack, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, completely echo what you've said there. Thanks for those that have come on the journey with us so far, and appreciate, as we sort of said, the fantasy leagues are full, but there are other ways to kind of get involved early doors and kind of ahead of next season and potentially get involved. So, no, really excited for it all, and just really keen to get back to our NFL Sundays.
I'm getting emotional just thinking about the lack of NFL Sundays, Jack, and I can't wait to get them back. Happy drafting then if your other leagues are getting underway, but that's it from us for now. We'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening.